And now, the show that bridges the gap between faith and business. Welcome to Bottom Line Faith.
On today's show, Chuck Welden, principal at Weldon Field Development.
I don't think people appreciate the importance of everybody's got authority somewhere in life. And if we don't teach it to our children initially, then they're going to rebel against authority in so many different ways at work or in the church or within their family. So these little small things, who is it? Tracy Atkins has a famous song called "And She Thinks We're Just Fishing." Well, he's investing in her and he's teaching her things while they're fishing.
Hello, everyone. This is Ray Hilbert, your host here at Bottom Line Faith, and we would like to welcome you back for another episode. If this is your first time as a listener to the Bottom Line Faith program, welcome aboard. We think you're going to be encouraged, you're going to be challenged, you're going to be equipped as a follower of Christ in business and in the marketplace to live out your faith every day. And if you are a long-term listener, welcome back. We are so glad you have chosen to rejoin us here for the weekly Bottom Line Faith program. Hey, listen, check out all of our other interviews. You can check those out at the bottomlinefaith.org website. That's bottomlinefaith.org. And if you are a Christ follower, a president, CEO, or business owner, and you're looking for community with other like-minded Christian business peers, visit our website at truthatwork.org. Truth at Work is the host ministry for the Bottom Line Faith program. Listen, this is the program, and the analogy we like to use, we're going to lift the hood, and we're going to tinker around in the engine of leadership of Christianity in the marketplace. And so we are excited that you've joined us today. You know, one of our value promises, one of our things that we like to offer here is a variety of Christ-following business leaders. And we have had startup business leaders, we've had CEOs of major corporations, we've had athletes, we've had entertainers, and so there's great diversity here. And so today I've called this my kind of second home, my home away from home. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. This is probably about my 10th trip to this beautiful city. We're not only in the Bible Belt, but I think we're in the shined buckle of the Bible Belt here in Birmingham.
You should add barbecue belt.
Barbecue belt. Okay. And that's a great introduction to today's guest is Chuck Welden, and Chuck is one of the principals at the Weldon Field Development Company. And Chuck, welcome to Bottom Line Faith.
I'm glad to be here.
Are we going to go for barbecue later? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I really hesitate to even take you anywhere unless I'm cooking it myself.
Oh, okay. So
you need to come back this fall. We cook a whole hog 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
Use our own hickory, everything.
You don't have to ask me twice. I'll be there. You just give me a date.
Anytime between November 1st and January 31st.
Anytime.
Yes, I'll do it anytime.
Okay. It's all right. Very good. So Chuck, thanks for joining the program. And you know, I learned about you a number of months ago when I interviewed some friends in the Memphis area, and it's just great. Some of you have checked out those interviews with our friends in Memphis. And so, Chuck, just tell us a little bit about your company, about your business. Tell us about how you came to Christ. Let's just get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Second generation real estate development business. We do real estate development, management, alternative investments, banking. It's my father, my uncle, and another gentleman named Pete Field started it about 40 years ago, and now there's 4 sons back. Of course, one of the things we say is blood is thicker than water, but it boils faster. So a lot of times you got to figure out when your father talks to you, is he talking as your boss or your investor or as your father? So that can be complicated at times. I went to the university. We're from Alabama. Went to the University of Alabama. I know you're a Notre Dame fan, Ray, so I know that's hard to believe, but I actually became a Christian at Alabama through Campus Crusade for Christ.
All right.
I know you would not think that could ever happen at the University of Alabama. But anyway, somebody shared the 4 spiritual laws there in the fraternity, and that is what led me to become a Christian. I had never gone to church with my family. I had gone to church in the summertime with my grandparents at Baptist churches, walked the aisles a number of times emotionally, but never could describe what my faith was. Wow. So in college is when I became a Christian.
And so did you have from that point on, do you believe you kind of walked faithfully, or have you had kind of ebbs and flows?
There's been some times and some seasons of life.
Yeah.
I always tell people that because you're going to have some seasons of carnality or backsliding, you need to build bridges in your life, because you never know what side of the bridge you're going to be on. You need to be on the bridge to help somebody. You need to be on the bridge side to get some help. So that's one of my big principles, is you got to have bridges with other believers, particularly men who can influence you, that really can affect you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, walk me through just a little bit more, maybe some of the challenges that you have as a Christ-following man in business and in the marketplace. What are some of those challenges that you face on a regular basis?
I'd say balancing faith, work, and family is very tough. I'm in what I would call a variable time job. In other words, I'm not someone who's checking in on a clock. There's every real estate project we do could be better, and we make mistakes. And so there's unlimited amount of time you could allocate. And so shutting that off and going home, I did not do a very good job on that. Younger, when I was in my career, particularly years ago, still struggle with it. And that's something I think that is, had obviously some consequences in the family, because it's just hard to turn it off, because you can always do a better job. You want to do a better job.
Yeah, so one of the things we love to do here at Bottom Line Faith is we want to be an encouragement, right? We want to help that other believer in business and in the marketplace, maybe just one person take one step, right, moving forward. So what would you say to encourage someone right now who just feels like maybe they're blowing it at home, or maybe they're not, meeting all those things that God's calling them to do in their home life because their business life is kind of taken over? Any words of encouragement around
Absolutely. That? A couple things. One is, I would not try to make drastic changes. I find that if you make drastic changes, it upsets the apple cart, and you put guilt on yourself. It's kind of like alcoholism. I guess they always tell those guys, you're supposed to just say, I'm not going to drink one day at a time. Well, I think likewise in this, you can't say, I'm never going to do this again. I think you have to say, create some bumpers or guardrails. I think you get with somebody older. I mean, my wife and I are huge in seeking and giving, seeking advice from older couples and giving advice to younger couples. So I would get somebody who's had experiences similar to you and see what kind of guardrails and bumpers they set up to avoid this type of outcome of not spending the time with your children wisely, not spending time investing in your wife. I mean, basically, nobody dies, on their deathbed says, I wish I'd spent less time with my children or my wife.
Yeah.
But I do hear people say all the time, I wish I had prioritized my work differently. So I think everybody's going to come to that conclusion at some point. It's just a matter of trying to set up some guardrails initially. And I think, again, talking to people who've already experienced it is really important.
So you shared, particularly early on, you maybe were a little bit out of whack, a little bit. What were some of those adjustments that you made to kind of return back home with your wife, your kids? Right. What were some things that you did? Well,
I created some rules about how many days I would travel. I mean, how many nights I'd be gone, because we do a lot of projects throughout the Southeast. So that was one thing. Secondly, we prioritize church, and there's almost no exception. I mean, I bet we only miss church twice a year. I mean, it's just on vacation we even prioritize it. We just think, and I'm not saying be legalistic. I'm just saying if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time.
That's
and
true.
So you gotta set some priorities and set some goals. Another thing is time with the children. I took each child on a mission trip by themselves for 7 to 10 days. And then we probably went on another 10 or 15 family mission trips in probably 8 or 10 countries around the world. And so that time was a really good way to help our children, invest in them.
That's incredible. What did those trips mean to your kids? How did that help shape their worldview and their value system?
Well, at supper last night, somebody asked me, how did you get your children to go to Uganda when they were 15, 13, and 12? I mean, what did they say? And my wife's answer was, we never asked them. So part of the deal is seeing that there's actually authority in their life, that they don't get a vote on everything. Just that by itself, I don't think people appreciate the importance of everybody's got authority somewhere in life. And if we don't teach it to our children initially, then they're going to rebel against authority in so many different ways at work or in the church or within their family. So these little small things, who is it? Trace Atkins has a famous song called "And She Thinks We're Just Fishing." Well, he's investing in her and he's teaching her things while they're fishing. I think just decision making about going on a mission trip, you're teaching them things they don't even realize you're teaching. And then secondly, the whole mission trips allowed them to see the fact that people did not have what they had.
Yeah.
We're from a very affluent area here, and they need to realize that we're the exception. God has blessed us, but with that blessing comes a responsibility. And we need to look at how we can sacrifice to help other people. So you don't do that just by looking at a paper book or watching a movie. But when you're sitting with somebody in their house, seeing a sick child in a mud house, and the child is sick because of emphysema because of using cooking on fire stoves, it just changes the way you look at life. So
It's
it's
all
influenced my
perspective.
children tremendously.
Well, folks, we are speaking with Chuck Welden, one of the principals at the Weldon Field Development Company, and we're in Birmingham, Alabama. And you've had obviously a successful business, and so let's talk though a little bit about failure. Let's talk about some of the lessons learned along the way. Over the course of you've been in business how long, Chuck?
Well, the family's been in business since 1970s.
Yeah.
I came back in 1986. I went to law school at Alabama. Went to George Washington for my, University of Alabama for my finance degree in business. Then George Washington University for law school, and New York University to get a master's in tax. So I came back to the family business, and shortly after I got back, you had the RTC days when the failure of the financial institutions in the late 80s and early 90s. We bought millions of dollars worth of failed loans and made money on all of them. So I thought I was a genius. I mean, I have a little bit of a pride, a sinful nature anyway, and this only added to that. And then, we had 10 more years of really good real estate, and then came 2008, the Great Recession. Well, I had kind of doubled down before the Great Recession. I thought things were going so well. Our investors were asking to invest, so I doubled our number of projects unwisely, against the advice of my father, and he has mentioned that more than once. But in the end, the Great Recession almost killed us financially. It was horrible. As somebody said to me, Chuck, you weren't as smart as you thought you were, and you're not as dumb as you think you are today. But I really felt dumb. So that was a huge lesson. But what really came through that lesson for me was faithfulness, because it got to a point where there's nothing I could do, no matter how hard I worked, we could not have paid all the banks off between our guarantees and the debt. It wasn't physically possible. And so the result was we had to trust God. And he orchestrated a series of events that as I was looking in the front windshield looked stupid. Like, God, this is not going to help my situation. But fast forward 2 years later, and looking in the rearview mirror, I realized God's plan for getting us out of that pickle and actually bringing our company back stronger afterwards was unfathomable. There's a plan that I never even could have imagined that he did.
I love hearing these kind of stories. And so in the midst of that, Chuck, what did you learn about yourself and what did you learn about God in that trial?
Well, certainly that God's more faithful than I am. Mm-hmm. Secondly, that I really needed to check my pride. I think that part of the reason I was wanting to double the size of our business was just thinking that we knew what we were doing. We were so good at it. And so I really just needed to think about humility. And I talked to Pat Robertson one time. We do business with Pat Robertson, a Regent. And I asked him one time, I said, what's the most important character of any Christian? He said, humility. And that's something I'm learned that I need to know more of, need to have more of.
We were joking recently with a guy we were talking who wrote a book on humility, and I said, how long would you like to talk about your humility? We just thought that was funny. That was a bad joke.
Unfortunately, the book, what I would say is, I have a book called The 10 Most Humble Men in the World and How I Chose the Other 9.
That's fantastic. On bookstores soon.
Yes, absolutely.
At Amazon.
Yes, right, of course. Drones are bringing this already.
That is fantastic. Well, so you've talked a little bit about failures, lessons learned, what God taught you about yourself, what he revealed about his character to you as well. What's been maybe the best advice? You were talking about your conversation with Pat Robertson a moment ago, but what would you say as you reflect back now, fourth decade in business, what's the best advice you can recall being given? Who gave it to you, and how does it impact you today?
I'm not sure who gave it to me, but early on, marrying a godly woman just became evident to me as one of the most important ingredients of success, because that happiness and that being on the same page affects your family, it affects your children, it affects your work, it affects your spiritual life. I just think that that's probably when I talk to young couples or businessmen that come to me, and the problem is people always think you're more successful than you are. They think your marriage is better than it is and think your children are better than they are. And so then people come talk to you thinking they're going to get all these pearls of wisdom. So I probably talk to, 50, 60 young people a year that will come to me to talk. Mm-hmm. And the advice I always give them is the marriage. I think that's the most important thing. If they have to pick one area to choose well and one area to invest well, it's the marriage.
Okay, so let's go there. We don't mind taking little detours
No.
once in a while. So let's say that I'm listening to the program. I'm a young man, or perhaps even young woman, and I'm single, but maybe God's brought somebody into my life, and I'm wondering, is this the person for me? Is this the person God has for me? What are those traits? What are those characteristics that I should be looking for that would help me understand this is a wise choice in a mate?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple attributes I'd look for. One is someone who really will put herself second. I hate to say it, but being the mother and a wife is probably the most difficult task in the world. And the ones that I've seen that do the best really come along their husband and put themselves second. I don't mean inferiority. I just mean the sense of they can recognize that their role is different, and they really support his role. And that's just an important thing. Second thing, and I don't know if this is a PG-rated audience or whatever, but I think intimacy. Marriage intimacy is huge. We teach a class, a 13-week class on marriage and parenting and sex. And it's surprising to me how many men and women do not have healthy sexual relationships. And that causes the man to wander. I'm not defending the man's, that's sin still, but sexual intimacy, and I think to talk about the number of children you want to have. Talk about how much time you expect your husband to be there. I mean, these are questions you really got to talk about ahead of time. I'm big into pre-marriage counseling. Yeah. Or I'm actually big into pre-engagement counseling. Nobody takes the ring off. I mean, nobody wants to take that ring off and give it up. And so you got to do pre-engagement counseling, and you should cover all these things in that.
What I'm hearing, and I've heard this now in several aspects of our conversation, and we talked about this before we went on the air. A big word for you is intentionality. And everything that I'm hearing you describe right now is being quite intentional, on the forefront of bringing these conversations, having a plan, being very candid about these things. Would you speak to the importance of intentionality in life, in business, in marriage?
I think it's one of the most important principles of your life, because you can aim at nothing and hit it every time. If you're not intentional, then you'll be like the Jews wandering the wilderness for 40 years. By being intentional, I tell my children all the time, if you take 10 minutes every day, you could change that whole day. You could reprioritize it. You could decide where the intersections are that are going to occur, that you need to do something differently, as opposed to just letting it come up on you as a surprise. So I think intentionality, sitting down and looking at your time, treasure, and talent. I think it's as simple as this. Where am I skilled? Where are my time, treasure, and talents? In other words, everybody has the same amount of time, but we all have different treasures. We have different talents. And if I'm not intentional in doing an inventory of those, then I will try to take on tasks I'm not prepared for and not qualified for. And so that's an example of intentionality, is really doing a good inventory of who you are, where you are, what your skills are, and figure out how that intersects with God's plans.
I really love that. One of the ways, I was actually speaking to a group of men recently, and I think that in this seminar I was doing, we were talking about what does a successful day look like? What does a successful life look like? And it seems like too often we determine whether or not we had a successful day based on what happened to us. Did I get that deal? Did I get along with people? Did my wife and I get in an argument or not? These are just anecdotal examples. Sure. But we too often, I think, determine whether or not we had a successful day based on what happened to us. What I hear you saying is a successful day is what happens through us.
Absolutely.
Waking up, asking God, okay, God, what needs to happen today?
Yep.
How can I take my gifts and talents and treasures and put a plan in place to maximize them? That's what I hear you saying.
That's exactly right. Bill Job, who's one of my heroes in the faith and huge business mission leader based in China for 30, 40 years, he told me one time at a meeting, he goes, Chuck, I think we're accountable a lot for our resources and money and time. He goes, but I think one of the things that we never talk about being accountable for is relationships. Every time you have an intersection with somebody, it may be unique to that person to have your type of Christian thought and knowledge in that person's life. And I just thought that has convicted me, whether I'm sitting on an airplane, whether I'm saying prayer with, we'll say prayer at supper even with atheists or Jewish partners. And they usually don't get offended, but it leads to conversation. But that took intentionality and took the willing to take that risk to do that. But I've had 50 chances to share my faith with non-believers just because I prayed in front of them. And it shocked them, but if you're nice and you're polite, you can get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, okay, so I'm hearing a couple things I want to just kind of follow up on. You used a phrase a moment ago, business as mission.
Yeah.
For our audience who might be listening that's never heard that phrase before, or maybe they've heard that phrase but they don't know what it means, would you add some context, and what do you mean by that? Tell us more about that.
Well, certainly, if you just think of any, and of course, most of your audience are business owners. As you say, they are the ones who are on the front side of the check, not the back side of the signature. Right. So I think just as business owners, we should take our business and run it in a way that has a holistic impact on everybody we come in contact with. I mean, basically, our spheres of influence as a business owner is our employees, our investors, our customers, our competitors, the government officials, suppliers, vendors. We have lots of spheres of influence that somebody at the church may never have a chance to intersect with or have a contact with. Well, that's great, and we need to do that, just like the Interstate Battery and Chick-fil-A and all those great companies do. But there's another side of it is, how about going overseas? There's international businesses required. And there's issues of access in Muslim countries or Hindu countries for missionaries. You take a business over there, and it's called Business as Mission. The idea is that I use my company in the spheres of influence to have holistic transformation in everybody I come in contact with. Well, think about it. The business is sustainable. If I'm making a profit, it just costs me a little bit extra overhead to be intentional, to have impact on those people, then I'm leveraging business. And I'm using those bridges and relationships that no one else may have, because somebody watches me how I treat my employees, how I in India. I'll give you an example. One of our places we invested was a Business as Mission India. If somebody gets hurt in India, you just fire them, because there's another billion of them there. I mean, I'm being kind of sarcastic, but but Tom Sudik in his company, he had a guy that broke his neck. He gave him months off. He came back and said, I still have a job. I can't believe it. Nobody's ever done that to me. I've never even seen anybody do that. That guy becomes a Christian because of HR management. That was the most boring class at Alabama, human resource management. But it actually has an impact if done correctly. So that's what Business as Mission is, using your spheres of influence, have access to countries you may not have access, and sustainability. You don't have to keep giving money away every year. I'm for missionaries. I'm for the churches. But this is using your business as well.
So that is really exciting to me for us to have that conversation. And so I've heard a few things that you've talked about that are unique to us as Christ following in business. You talked about being intentional and praying with unbelievers, agnostics, atheists, and so forth. So that's a discipline or a practice that you have instilled, right? And it's given you that mission field platform.
Yes.
You've talked about HR policies and maybe just going the extra mile to invest in your employees. So that's a practical way to set ourselves apart from the world's ways.
Yes.
Right? What other models, whatever practices or disciplines have you either instituted in your company or you've seen instituted that is great examples of doing business as mission or propagating the gospel through business?
Sure.
What comes to mind?
Well, rightnow.org has a huge library of videos and audio cassettes or I guess videos really that you can as a company join. I don't know if you've heard Right Now.
Right Now Media. Yep.
Right Now Media. So
they
we use that for our company.
Yep.
We started that for our company last year. It gives access to Christian content on a variety of issues: marriage, parenting, drug addiction, just all those issues that as parents we struggle, and also has really good family entertainment with a Christian message for the kids. So that's something we've done at our company. Another thing is co-tribute. I don't know if you, Alan Barnhart, who you interviewed in Memphis, has done that, and I think Tom has, and we're aiming toward it. You set up a fund, and you let your workers do a certain number of volunteer hours a month. You pay them for it, but they don't get the money. It goes into like a charitable fund that they can give away, or they can pool together as part of the company to impact your location or the community of your company. And all of a sudden, they're together doing something together. It builds a Christian ethos within the company, and it has an impact on the community. So there's probably 8 or 10 different things like that we do.
And you call that co-tribute.
Yes, it's called
I love
co-tribute.
that. I'm talking with Chuck Welden, one of the principals at Weldon Field Development Company. And Chuck, let me ask you this. If someone wanted to learn more about you or the company, what's the best way for them to find you? Are you on the web?
I think so. Hey, you have to remember, I don't text,
Okay.
I don't ATM, I don't Facebook.
You do have a LinkedIn profile. How about that?
No, I don't have a LinkedIn profile.
Well, it's on there. You just don't have a photo.
Who put that up there? Just call Chuck Welden and call my office, 205-930-4500. I return every call.
Love it.
It's that simple. Don't text me.
I love it. That's old school, baby, right there. That is great. Well, we talked about before we went on the air, there's one question that we ask at the end, and believe it or not, we're at the end of our time together on this interview. We ask every guest here at Bottom Line Faith. It's what we call our 423 question. It's based out of Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, the words of Solomon, who said, "Guard your heart. Above all else, guard your heart, for from it flows the wellspring of life." This was Solomon's top of the line, pay attention to this, if you don't remember anything else, advice. He said, above all else, guard your heart. So Chuck, let's kind of fast forward the clock, and you're towards the tail end of your time this side of eternity. You have a chance to gather your family, your friends, your loved ones, those who are most precious to you, and you now have a chance to pass along the single most important piece of advice. Above all else, what would you say?
That's a great question. I always tell my children, live life backwards. When you're on your deathbed, what do you want people to be saying about you? And on your funeral, what do you want the people to say up front? By the way, my funeral is by invitation only, and there will be barbecue served. So if you send me your email, I'll invite you.
So that means it's going to be between November and January.
I won't be cooking that barbecue. I would tell you one lesson I've really learned that I think applies in almost all these areas that we've talked about is the distinction between an abundance mentality and a limited resource mentality. Psalm 50 says God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Well, that sounds so simple. Oh, yeah, sure, I trust that. But think about how it plays out. If you really believe that, then you trust that God will provide you the resources to accomplish anything He's assigned you to. So you quit worrying about things. You also approach things as being open-handed. As Martin Luther said, I've held many things in my hands, and I've lost them all. But whatever I've placed in God's hands, that I still possess. So from that principle, you trust God, you're open-handed, which means you're open-handed in giving advice, investing in others, investing in young people who may be your competitor one day. But if they're a Christian competitor, they're advancing the kingdom. And I don't believe that it's a net sum. I mean, it's an abundance mentality. And also it provides generosity and giving. All of a sudden, your approach of giving and what you have to have and to keep to make yourself comfortable the rest of your life until you think you're going to die, which you don't even know when you're going to die anyway. Kind of like that fat guy in the Bible who builds 2 more warehouses for his goods and then dies the next day. Mm-hmm. I just think that principle, it plays into your marriage, into work, into your children, into generosity, and investing in others, almost more than any principle in the Bible. Because I trust God to provide what I need all the time.
It's phenomenal. That is some of the most excellent and Christ-centered, biblically worldview-based. That's one of the best answers I've ever heard.
Well, I didn't say I did it.
You said it's advice.
It's advice.
But something tells me you're
working on it.
You have intentionality in living and conducting life in that fashion. Wow, I can't, as I said, it's fast as 30 minutes on air. Has this gone fast for you? It has for me.
Well, just come back and go deer hunting. You won't believe the advice you'll get and how much wisdom in a weekend of deer hunting with me would be.
All right.
And food, gain 10 pounds.
I know one thing, we won't be texting.
No.
So, well, folks, what a pleasure it has been. Chuck, thanks for being on the program today.
It's been a pleasure.
This was so much fun, and I wish you all had the privilege of sitting across the desk as I do from Chuck. Just an incredibly warm smile and just a twinkle in his eye. You can tell this man loves Jesus and enjoys life and is giving back in every way possible. It's an honor that I get to interview leaders like Chuck in the program here at Bottom Line Faith. Again, this is Ray Hilbert. God bless. Thank you for listening to Bottom Line Faith. We'll see you soon.
Bottom Line Faith is brought to you by Truth at Work. If If you'd like to hear about new episodes or listen to past episodes, visit us online at bottomlinefaith.org. You can also subscribe to the show through Google Play and iTunes.